3,
Two.
1. Hi, Tribe. I'm Evelyn,
And I'm Virsaviya.
and you're listening to Objectively Typed, a podcast where we discuss the objective personality system. Today, we'll be discussing the topic of shadow functions. And what we mean by that is essentially it's the functions that aren't in your natural top 4, what they call the grant stack. So, in cognitive function talk in Myers-Briggs and in OPS, you have kind of your 4 core functions. And then there are another 4 that you don't have. And so socionics, I believe, calls them shadow functions. Socionics has a whole model, actually. I don't know how familiar you are with that, with
Not at
how
all.
we, in the socionics model, we do have all 8 functions. However, there's like the top 4, and then there's like the 4 shadow underneath it, and they show up in your life in different ways. But OPS, so Dave does have a video out that's called something like all 8 functions. Like, do we have all 8 functions? And so from an OPS standpoint, you don't have all 8. You have your 4, and then you can kind of simulate the other ones. So any other setup you want to say?
No, well, this is something that we were just talking about, is the question of whether or not the modalities change your functions. I think that's maybe like a separate question. Let's address the shadow functions first. But I
Yeah.
think that's also an interesting question.
What I wanted to do was walk through the observers first, since that is where you and I are on opposite axes. And so what's a shadow function for me is a mainline function for you, and vice versa. So we'll start with the observers, we'll walk through those, and then we'll talk about the deciders and how that kind of works out. So
Sounds great.
so starting with your top function, so extroverted sensing. Um, extroverted sensing is, for me, almost the hardest, like one of the hardest things it is to do naturally. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just to offer, according to Dave and Shannon, and I found this to be true as well, in terms of accessibility of the shadow functions, whatever your saviors are, the opposite charge. So like for me, having savior SE, the opposite of that would be SI. Those are the ones that are most accessible. And then the opposite of your demons of all 8 functions are the ones that are probably least accessible. So yeah, so my lead SE is the opposite of your demon SI. So that would be, of all the 8 functions, the one that's the hardest for you to access.
Yeah. And then like one of the things Dave talks about in that video of do we have all 8 functions is it's kind of like that function is the one that's going to be sort of the ultimate savior. I don't know if that's the right way to put it. He said I think he called it savior or something like that. But like for him as an NI, like what was really helpful for him is learning how to SI. And I think, for me personally, the way that shows up is because I am lead any, so I am savior intuitive. My top savior is intuitive. So I have demon sensing as it is, period. Right.
Yeah.
And then my natural mode of sensing. So we all do all 4. We all do intuition, sensing, thinking, and feeling. And so my natural mode of sensing is introverted sensing. So when I am going to do sensing,
yeah,
it's going to be
you're going to automatically narrow down.
Yeah. My need for control is attached to the sensing, and my need for gather is attached to the ideas, and that's what I want to do. And so it's hard, and this is why, like, and we'll talk about SI when we get there, but like SI is kind of a tricky function to have, because in order to SI, you kind of have to SE first. You have to gather the sensory to then organize it.
Well, any of the functions except for SE, you have to gather sensory before you can do any of the functions, right? They don't just exist in a vacuum, because at the end of the day, we live in a sensory world. So before you can NE, NI, or SI, you have to have some sensory.
Yeah. That's true. You could say that the observers all start from SE as like the basis. So yeah, I mean, I guess let's compare and contrast the way that these show up in our lives, since for me it's a shadow function. Right. So it's incredibly difficult to do.
Whereas my shadow, my like biggest shadow is NE, which is your savior.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So we're very complementary in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I can't NE to save my life.
It's an interesting thing. So like, I'll talk about SE since that's the one we're on. Like, I think it's something that I can do. because like the world demands you to do it. So it's like, I have to learn how to SE. Like I can't, I
Right.
feel like you could get by in the world without any, like, I don't know that any is necessarily like as sort of required to,
Yeah.
to live, if you will. Whereas like SE, like if I don't gather the sensory, if I don't, if I don't take in the sensory, like I'm going to be very dysfunctional. Like it's just not going to work. And I think it also helps that I have masculine sensing. So
Yeah.
the sensory is really immovable, but I think that's another reason why SE is like kind of a challenge, is it's so immovable. It's like such a it's like a monster that I don't want to deal with, that I'd rather
Yeah.
just ignore. But when I do pay attention to it, it's like, okay, I need to really pay attention to it. So yeah.
Yeah. I think as you're describing that, one thing that came up in my head was that like there is this aspect. So like in terms of if you remove the introverted or extroverted part of the functions, like your preference would be NTFS, right?
Yes.
And then
Yes.
each one of those is attached to either it's broad and gathers all the things, or it automatically narrows down.
Right.
And so your SI, like, so the shadow functions in the OPS system, their argument is that it doesn't exist, and that, like you said, we simulate it by expanding or narrowing.
Hmm.
So you automatically narrow, and it's like that effort of
Opening it back up.
trying to not, yeah,
Yeah.
opening it up, which is
Yeah.
the same like struggle that I have with intuition, because when I do spot a pattern, it automatically wants to narrow it down, and trying to keep that open is very challenging. I'm not even sure how to go about it, actually.
Yeah. And the way the equation works in OPS is you look at the savior human need plus the domain, if you will. So for me, that's why NE and SE are the opposites, if you will, or that's why SE is the one that will like save me, right? Because my top savior human need is gather. So I'm taking
Mhm.
gather, which I do naturally, and now I have to attach it to sensing, which I don't do naturally. Once I can do those things, that's how that's good, I guess. From
Yeah.
In Dave's perspective. I'm still like, I see the value of gathering sensory just so I can narrow it, essentially. Like I don't.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I
I
asked.
kind of
I think early on in the group, I had asked like, "What's the value of just gathering the sensory?" And I don't. I don't know if anybody ever answered it.
What's the value of just gathering the sensory?
Yeah, like why
Well,
should I do that?
well, I think that's an interesting question. Like for me, without gathering the sensory, I can't know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, that is the first, like whatever else it is that I'm working on, whatever my goals are, whatever my endpoint is, I can't get to that endpoint if I don't first know where I am now, and that's the gathering of the sensory,
Yeah,
right? Whatever direction I'm moving in, I need to know where I'm starting,
yeah, yeah.
and
Well,
that's
and
what
I
that
think,
means to me.
yeah. Oh man, I had a thought in my head and I lost it. Oh man, it was about SE.
It'll come back to you.
Yeah, we're talking about gathering the sensory. Oh, I don't know. I'll have to remember, because I don't remember.
But
Yeah. Anyway,
so,
go
I
on.
mean, it actually, as you were explaining that, one thing that popped into my head is like, so if human needs trump everything else, which they by and large do,
Yeah.
wouldn't the thing that saves you is finding a way to do your opposite human need in the
And I,
yeah, your
like in
opposite
my
human
case.
need, but in your shadow function rather than one of the functions you have. So in your case, yeah, doing NI, in my case doing SI. Wouldn't that be the thing that saves you? Because the human needs trump whatever, I guess we're calling them domains now, whatever else is going on in your type. So if you can manage to control in the domain that is your biggest demon, wouldn't that,
Well, I think what he's getting at there is that
oh wait,
we.
that would be,
I
yeah.
think you're kind of using your strengths to get to your demons a little bit. Is that
Yeah.
because I'm going to naturally gather? How can I use that to get to do my demon, yeah, domain, or however we want to call it.
Yeah.
But no, I think there is incredible value of also narrowing
Well,
down.
both.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think there's
Yeah.
both. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. um yeah, if anything, I think that because I'm naturally savior N, I think that NI and NE, and so this kind of is a good segue to the next one. NI and NE is just a lot of times I see it as just a matter of focus and scope. is
Yeah,
like,
yeah, exactly.
and so that's not going to be a big challenge. So like that's not going to be like the big sort of like mountain that I have to
Yeah,
climb because
that's
I
true.
naturally N is just like okay all the time. And
Yeah,
so
yeah,
that's just a matter
it's
of
a
picking which
savior.
one of those connections. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
you
let's
can
talk
do the positive and the negative of it. Yeah.
yeah. So we're kind of talking about NI, and that was the next one on the list. So like that's how it shows up for me. I think where I struggle for NI, and so this is where like the modality we can talk about it a little bit here is I think for me it's more of a feminine N issue than a NE versus NI issue that I tend to see in my life. Like
Oh, interesting.
what I seem to struggle with is more, and this is something I'm coming to realize lately, is that my double feminine NF consume is probably more of a problem for me than some other things. And it's
Because of that, like, double femininity and how flowy it is?
yes,
Or
exactly, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Because my FI is movable and my NE, which is sort of like my future vision of like how to get what I FI want, is driven by my imagination, right? Our N
right.
is our imagination. Mine happens to
Yeah,
be NE, but it's still my imagination. And if
yeah.
my imagination is constantly thinking of all these possibilities out there and all these connections, and my F is like very murky, it's like I don't. It's hard for me to know like what I want and how to get there because they're both sort of murky.
Vague and yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So the map and the destination can be tricky and
Yeah.
hard to nail down.
And I think that's where I think that's where the modalities do play, like, are really valuable because, um, if your N was masculine, right, the way that you narrow down or don't narrow down, it would be different in how you access that shadow function. So in your double feminine NEFI consume, my double feminine NIFI consume, right? Like bringing something in, bringing one of our masculine functions into that would help it to like triangulate and get access to a more immovable version of those functions.
So that's exactly what I actually do though.
Yeah.
So obviously, so to get to NI, I have to use my SI. And so my SI is my masculine observer. And so a lot of times like that's what I need to do is I have all these NE, my NE has a bunch of connections and it's movable and my FI is very movable. So what I have to do is SI masculine it down. And it
Hmm.
kind of narrows down one and it becomes like an NI connection that I'm trying to make, that I'm trying to go for. And that's what I have learned that I have to like bullet point out what I do and don't do and stuff like that. Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do SI to make my NI more masculine, or
Hmm.
like, yeah. So I'm used, yeah. So similar to you're trying to get at the NI to use your SI, whereas I'm trying to make my NI more solid by bringing in the SI.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah.
And this is like what Dave and Shannon refer to as, triangulating. So when you're able to use, regardless of whether you're a double decider or a double observer, when you're able to use your two opposite functions, so right now we're talking about our observers,
Hmm.
use them together, you are able to triangulate to simulate your shadow functions, right, to get at the ones that you don't have, but also to simulate at um, your bringing in some of that masculinity to your feminine function or femininity to your masculine function,
Yeah.
depending on how you're using it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I want to talk about, since we're on NI, I want to talk a little bit about the difference between a demon and a shadow function also. Cause so
Oh, that's good.
you have demon NI.
Yes.
So NI is in your stack and it shows up for you as a demon.
Hmm.
And that's different from me. I don't have NI at all, and so it's not a demon. It's just,
Doesn't exist.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's something, it's for me, it's almost more like we were talking about simulating the functions. It's like more like a tool that I can use.
Yeah.
It's not a thing. If you, I don't even know how to
Yeah.
explain anything.
Well, I think this is where, like, getting back to the core binary questions here is really important in that. So if we break down our saviors and our demons, so we both have gathering as a savior, which means that we can deal with the positivity and the negativity that comes with that. And we both have control as a demon, which means that we sometimes feel stuck by it.
Right.
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 And then also I have sensory as a savior, but intuition as a demon. So I feel
Right.
stuck there. And you, the opposite.
Yeah.
So when you like bring those together, um, so I'm going to be able to SI in a more savior-like state, even though I don't have it, because at the end of the day, sensory is my savior.
Right.
And you're going to be able to NI in a more closer to a savior type state.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sort
'Cause
of. Yeah.
you're pulling in your SI to narrow your
Yeah.
intuition, but intuition is still a savior for you,
Right.
right?
Right.
So,
Right.
but I'm gonna feel more stuck in that intuition, and you're gonna feel more stuck in that sensory, even if your sensory, if you expand it or I expand my intuition.
Yeah, yeah, because I noticed that like when we were having our demon NI conversation that like, when you tell me what the NI concept that you're thinking of is, I can totally I'm like, "Oh yeah, I can narrow my
Yeah,
N down to that." I get that concept and I have it in my life too, but I'm like you said, like for me because intuition is a savior, it's a savior state. Like it's like in my
yeah.
dominant it's my dominant hand. It's not difficult to sort of work through, you know?
Especially because we do have gather above organize.
Yeah.
That means that in the things that we have gathered, that NI
It's one of
concept is there, or that SI
them.
organized sensory is within all the other stuff,
Right,
right?
exactly.
So it encompasses it.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
So-
So, yeah. Okay. So moving on to the next one from NI to NE. So how does what do you do? You said you don't
Well,
NE. Like,
so I think that's an uh, I think I do and I don't. So I actually disagree with Dave and Shannon have a function flow, right? So like if you're trying to do something, they have a recommended like flow of like how do you get from A to B. And
mhm,
they say that you start with SE, then do SI, then do NE, then do NI.
correct.
And I have found my function flow as far as the observers go to be different. I start with the sensory, then I go and gather whatever connections exist within the sensory. Then I narrow those down, those connections to NI. And then from that, I organize my sensory into SI, which I
Mhm.
think is makes a case for why SI is quote unquote the hardest
The
function to
hardest
have.
function. Yeah.
Right. Because in order to SI well, you have to hit all those other observers in some capacity.
Well, see, you've mentioned this before, and I can't remember what I said before. And so, like this again, I'm sorry, those of you who are listening, but when this is like the struggle of my life is the combination of feminine FI and feminine NE. So like I don't know what I said before, but what I say now is because I was just going through this actually at work. I got this assignment, and I was like, so my senior vice president asked me to do a thing, and I very little direction, if you will. So like I actually wrote down the function flow, and for me, it is SE or yeah SE SI, and then I'm able to let my NE go wild and do its thing. I kind
Okay.
of and then if I want to narrow it down to like one key concept, then NI would be probably the last one.
So
But
how do you SI first?
so ISI, and I think it's just a difference of like what you consider to be SI. So
Okay. Yeah.
SE to me, SI is very basic, like this, like our notes are just very basic bullet point, one thing, then the next thing, then the next thing, then the next thing. So
Yeah.
like it's like I gathered the information and it's in like a big paragraph or it was in multiple documents like that. And I just took that and I just pulled out like bullet point of the exact thing that it said. I just put it in a bullet point fashion. Like that's SI.
Oh,
I'm just
okay.
I'm literally just organizing all the sensory. I'm just putting it down. And then from there I can look at that and I can say, okay, I'm connecting this piece to this piece because I'm naturally NE. So like an
Right. Yeah.
SI
Yeah.
and basically I'm trying to get basically what I was trying to do is get it into my functions as quickly as possible. Right. Like so I wasn't trying to SE for the sake of SE. I was SE
Yeah.
to get it into SI as fast as I could. So then and then kick it up to my savior NE, which can find a whole bunch of connections once I need them.
And then do the thing.
And
Yeah.
then narrow it down to like, okay, here are the key points I want to talk to people about. And I think that's a lot of times what you're thinking of SI is you want to collect the key points. When I SI, I'm not necessarily looking at the key points. I'm just taking all that sensory, which for me is this big mass of information, and I'm just pulling out and organizing it in a way that I can sort of handle. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that that's a great example of, different functions and different approaches.
Hmm.
Um, I think so. I think there's like some ways of SIing that's like ready and like chronological, right? You don't
Yeah.
have to look for a pattern because that pattern already exists.
Yeah.
But if you have um sensory that doesn't have an NI or some kind of like what are you using to organize by? So some people organize by color or like by these other really sensory and accessible concepts. But at the end of the day, there's a concept. There's some kind of pattern that you're assigning according to, right?
Yeah. But I think SI in its purest form, at least the way I experience it, is not even that. Like it really is just taking, especially like I speak it because my SI is masculine. So like, and I'm maybe because I'm a kinesthetic learner, like it's a body feeling that like when there's a lot of sensory, it's just like a mass of stuff to us. And it's like, if you could imagine like this cloud of like stuff that's like, I can't see, I can't get through the world until you've like lined it up. I don't really care what the concept is. You just need to kind of like take this mass that's in my face that I can't see and organize it in any way, shape or form that's like clearly laid out. Then I can handle it. You know, that's how I kind of experience SI. And we're talking about SI, but we're supposed to be talking about NE.
Well, I mean, they're related, right?
They are related.
Well, I guess, what started us on this is that like when I do have NE, it's so, I have we all have intuition. So even though my intuition is automatically like wants to narrow down immediately, before it narrows down, I do go through the NE, like in terms of like when I have sensory that I've gathered, trying to spot the patterns between those sensory. I'm doing that. It's just, it automatically wants to narrow down. The areas where I really, really struggle is in that simulating possibilities kind of thing, where like, for example, if you take chess.
Yeah.
So when you're, or any kind of, I let's go with chess. But like, if you're in the offensive, I feel like there's an eye there going like, okay, your strategy, how am I going to approach it this way? Whereas on the defensive, it's more like, okay, well, this possibility might come, this might come, this might come, this might come. The person might do all of these different things, right? And that's where I really suck at the NE, is the possibilities of what might happen, rather than like it just automatically wants to narrow down into like, okay, this will happen.
And that's what I've experienced like between my husband and I is, because he has NI and I have NE, and I oftentimes am giving him like a lot of our conversation I've now seen is like me, like because he will lock into one NI concept and I'll be like, but what about all these like 50 other things, that are this, and it is exactly that. Like I think for the NE users, especially the ENTPs and ENFPs, lead NEs, we are doing that like constantly. Like our lives, like we're playing fourth dimensional chess in our brains constantly,
all the time, probably.
And so that's what they mean by a savior state. It's not that we're doing it, oh, I'm so good at it. Like it's like it's like breathing the air. Like we don't mean to be doing it.
I was thinking about this the other day. I have a friend from high school who, like, it started out as like a joke and then it turned into a thing where he would, like, with no context at all, make these random guesses about things, like during conversations or something that somebody else had, like just random guesses, and they were like 80-90% of the time right. And like looking back on it, I think a lot of it was because he had that NE where like he's gathered all these concepts, but it's not even like in a conscious state, especially because it's a savior. Like I gather SE all the time. I don't realize that I'm gathering it. It's just autopilot, right? So you're gathering all those concepts. And when something sensory comes together and you stitch it all together with this SI thing, like that NE is always there somewhere in the head, right? Without this, like, I feel like NI and SI tend to be more almost not tangible, but like accessible. Yes.
I just had a thought.
Yes.
And that might explain why SE is so hard for us, is that so I feel like because NE and SI are on a coin together, I feel like what they do is they take, like I'm taking little SI details and I'm making a bunch of connections based on like just little bits of like digital data, if you will, like very discrete data, I should say. And it's like the SE, there's like too many points, because for each point that exists in I am going full hippie here, so bear with me. But for each one of these, if you can imagine like sensory as like data points, right? I'm making like 50 connections off of every single one of them. So when I see like when there's too much sensory, it's like I can't
It's
handle it.
overwhelming.
It's overwhelming. It's like the
Yeah.
SE and the NE are getting together and they're just like overwhelming the
What?
system.
That's
And so
interesting.
I
Yeah.
can't tell. It's like mentally exhausting. So that might be part of the reason why we tend to ignore the sensory. It's because it's like, you gotta narrow down that sensory for me first, like simplify it. Like, that's what anything else on any, actually, before I move
Well, I
on.
actually wanted to know, like, I would love to hear from you guys, like, how if how would you go about simulating NE if you don't have it?
Well,
I feel like all of the other functions are a lot more
I know.
accessible. Like NE is the hardest one to understand, I think.
Yeah.
And then once you do understand it, it might be because it's the one that's like the one that will save me because it's the opposite of my last demon. But how would you go about like practicing that?
NE is it's a tricky one to like talk
Right?
about. I mean, that's why like I had sent Shannon that mind expanding meme, and then they put it in their Q&A and stuff. And I almost like I felt sheepish doing it because it kind of makes NE seem to be this like otherworldly function, but it kind of sometimes it feels that way. Um I
Well, I
think you
think,
need to bootstrap your NI. I mean, frankly, I mean, it is what they say, right? So, you take your human need of gather
mhm.
and your NI. I think the function flow that you're describing, well, hold on. You said you do SE, then you try to do any. Is that right? SE any?
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
go and look for what patterns exist in my SE.
Yeah. See, that's interesting because I feel like that's a little bit different.
I mean, like what I'm looking for patterns, and it's like so when I organize my life, say for example, I have a pile of paperwork, right? I'll go through the paperwork and I'll just go through it, start putting it in piles, and like these patterns will emerge, and then after that, I can SI.
Yeah.
Because everything is organized. But
Yeah.
so it's that like, okay, does this pattern exist? Yes or no. So it's like
It's like
a
a mini
catalog of
NI.
patterns. Yeah. It's
Yes.
a catalog of patterns, and I pick out the ones that I actually need, and everything
Yeah.
else automatically gets dismissed.
Yeah, and that's how I've seen. At least that's what it seems to be that the SENI users are doing. It's actually almost like a quick succession of NIs, like this
Yeah.
NI and then that NI and then that. That's how my husband does it for sure,
and
for
and
sure.
that's like also the sensory version that NESI users do is like you do gather the sensory, but you're also automatically like dismissing whatever's irrelevant and
Yes.
going in just for the SI that actually
Yeah.
matters.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's the way you people
Yeah,
have
us
to deal
people.
with it. I feel like the SENI axis is more straightforward. Like it's like more. I don't know if it's just more popular or what. I don't know, but
Well, I think more of the world is
kind
um
of built for it.
yes. So not SENI access per se. I think it's built for sensory because everyone has to go through sensory
Yeah,
somewhere.
yeah.
And then also I think there is that element of the NI. Like so what you described as overwhelming, when you recommended Into the Spider-Verse, and I was like,
Yes.
okay, she loved it so much, let me go watch it,
Yeah,
especially to have a better understanding of NE. And
yeah.
holy shit, that movie was so overwhelming for me. I was like, what's going on? There's too much. What is happening? It's all over the place. Like
Yeah,
visually stunning movie.
yeah,
And it
yeah.
was a good story, but it was for me, it was that kind of exhaustion.
Yeah, and it felt like candy for my NE because that's the thing about it is like because I'm always doing that. Sometimes it's fun to have fiction, and I think this is why like the ENPs, the ENFPs, ENTPs are so into like fantasy things. Like I heard Kendrick talking about this in one of his interviews just recently about how like INTPs and stuff are really into like fantasy writing and things, and it's because it's like candy to us. Like we're already kind of doing that. We're already making these weirdo connections and stuff, and so for a movie to just do that and put that out there and what can you find and what it's like, oh yeah, great, awesome, like like
Yeah.
finally, like just give it to me because
Yeah,
and
there's not a
yeah,
lot that's like that.
yeah. So yeah, I did enjoy that movie. Yeah, yeah. So SI, um we've kind of been talking
SI.
about it throughout.
Yeah, as we
Yeah,
talked about the observers,
yeah, I
I
think
think we
so.
can.
I'm trying to think if there's anything. The thing about me with SI is, my SI being masculine, It's very, very strong. You know, I've mentioned this before, like even, you know, as an ENFP, I'm incredibly routine and everything like that. And I kind of always give credit to my masculine SI. Um, and I think the other thing for me is like, even though it's my fourth function demon, I can 100% relate to like the ISTJs that's their top function. Like I get that. I'm like, I see why you're that way because there's like this little upside down version of that inside of me too that needs that sensory to just be simple, if you will, you know, like, yeah,
I like that, for the
yeah,
sensory to be simple.
yeah.
I
It's
feel like
kind of how it
that's,
comes up.
yeah, yeah,
Clean
yeah.
lines, simple, not a lot of distraction. Now, I want to talk to you about SI actually, because that one is a virtual for you or shadow
It's a
function.
shadow function, yeah, but
But
I
you said
actually SI decently.
yeah, and you said you
And
do it as like a hobby almost.
that's one of the reasons why I thought I was an ENFP, is because I do SI, but it is exhausting and taxing for me.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that's because I'm doing that narrowing down. But one thing that I noticed, so the only exact type twin that I have is Khloe Kardashian, and she has close CD, where she walks you through her OCD things, and that's very much how I am as well. Like uh, I gather all of the things, right? I SE, I want to SE all the things, but because of that double activated NI, I do narrow down and organize. Um, so like I had a filing cabinet when I was 14. Like, what teenager has a
Yeah.
filing cabinet? But one
Yeah.
thing, like, I like to SI because then I can SE better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like my home, my room, my environment right now is a bit of a mess, but everything has its place. Everything has a home, so to speak, which is how I like to live.
Hmm.
Um, and because everything has a home, when something is not in its home, that is like new sensory for me to gather and attend to. And it
Yeah.
makes it easier for me to gather to SE better.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. And I'm gonna try to articulate something I've tried to articulate before and failed. But so I'm gonna try. Because like I
Okay.
feel like the difference between like you with your shadow SI, if you will, if we want to call it the shadow or virtual SI versus me with it in my natural stack, is that it's like you're organizing the sensory by a certain category almost. Like it's like you want it
Yeah.
to fit an NI pattern.
Yeah.
Whereas with us, we just need the sensory organized. And oh, that was the other aspect of this. Actually, we should bring up. This came up in the any Zoom call. Was for us, the sensory is like personal. Like
Yeah.
if it changes or it moves, it's like it is like a personal reaction or like this weird thing that doesn't feel good.
Whereas for me,
Whereas
the patterns are personal.
yeah, yes,
Yeah, very much so.
because like, and this is a weird example, but I'm just gonna put it out there. So home screens on your phone, right?
Yeah.
So there's this podcaster that I listened to, CGP Grey, a few years ago, like the very first or second episode that I found of him on Cortex. He showed his home screen layout, and it was like I had never seen an iPhone done like this. And I mean, I could try to show on the camera if it'll work out, because mine is now like that. You can kind of see there are only 3 rows of icons. It's very, very minimal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had never seen anything like that before. I had always seen just like home screen full of icons, and I've always hated it. It's like too much sensory there.
Yeah.
It's too much stuff, right? So seeing that, I was like, oh, and so I organized all my icons like that day, and it has stayed that way for years and years. And I've tried to get my husband onto this, like, oh, this is so cool. Like, don't you want this? And when he does it, it's much more of like he's trying to fill an NI pattern of an aesthetic of looking a certain way or it being something. Whereas with me, it's like it's almost like I need it to be organized. Like it's not aesthetically pleasing. It's like if it were the other way, it actually is distracting and hard for me to use my phone. Whereas for him, it's
Huh.
like he wants it to look pretty. He wants it to fit
Well, I
this
wonder how much
NI
of that is
idea.
his modality, but yeah.
That too, visual for sure. But I do, that's what I've seen the difference with the people who do this type of thing. And so like I had asked the group many moons ago, everybody show your home screen and give your type. And I noticed that a lot of us on the NESI axis had some sort of like very ordered home screens. Like
Yeah.
some people were organizing them like by color or something like that. But like all the ENPs came back with like these very like ordered things. And I was like, I think that's our SI coming out.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, my sister, who is Savior Feminine SI, at least that's what I'm assuming. Her home screen drives me insane because and actually this is one of the reasons why I don't like using iPhones, because I love widgets and
Oh yeah.
how they help to organize. So like my device looks like it is also organized by, so like for example, I have over here I have all of my Reddit stuff, and then over here, up here, I have all of my social media, and like,
Right.
so it is organized, but it's organized by like
Okay. By a
location,
concept. Yeah.
by, well, yes, by a concept, but it is also organized by appearance, which is curious if that's
Right.
NI or visual or like
Right.
what's going on there.
But mine is not organized. So my stuff is just hidden. It's not in categories really.
That's the thing that like
That's what
I
I'm trying to
notice
say.
about some people, like when it comes to home or organization, it's like out of sight, out of mind,
Yes.
versus like, no, it needs to have a home kind
Yes.
of ways
Yes.
of cleaning and maintaining a home.
Yes. That's the distinction I've been trying to articulate, that I've seen, that I've observed,
Yeah.
among people, is that it appears to be a difference between sort of a, almost just like this animalistic need. Like, how like when your teeth are dirty, you just know you're like, I need to brush my teeth. That
Yeah.
feeling that's just like, I don't feel good, versus I want to look nice. Like it's different. It's different. There's a different feeling there. And that's how I feel, is it's more like an uncomfortableness. Like I was like, yeah. Okay. So now switching to the deciders, where you and I are on the same axis.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
so I want to start with FE. I put FE right at the top because FE is like, I feel like it's
Well,
really
that's your
hard.
other big demon,
That's
right?
true, I
So
guess.
like your big demons are SEFE.
Yeah. I don't
My,
know though.
yeah.
We've had this debate, and so we never did really finish it, because
Okay.
I mean, I put it there because it is like a fun function that's like a thing, but I
Yeah.
don't know how much it's, because, okay, let's back up a second. So you're
Okay.
right. I'm NETE, right?
Hmm.
So my savior decider is TE, extroverted
Right.
thinking. Now, from a human needs standpoint, though, I am tribe above self. And that's where I feel like FE is not that hard for me, because it's still the tribe, right? Like I'm still
Right. Yeah.
obligated to the tribe. And so if the tribe wants FE, I will do FE. I feel like it's probably harder for an introverted decider savior to, like an FI,
Uh-huh.
to FE, because you are obligated to the self above the tribe. And it just, but I
Well,
mean,
I
it's
mean,
like
I
you
think
could,
that that's getting into that same question of like,
yeah,
do our human needs trump our domains, right?
yes, yeah.
So, and I think for you and me in particular, and I think this will be different for deciders, we're double deciders. So those two are in the
Anyway,
middle,
yeah,
those two are triangulating really well, and we're
yes,
going to be able to get at our savior, our demon, and both of our decider shadows a
exactly.
lot more easily than somebody who's a decider and has them at the polls.
That is true. That is true. So like,
So,
if I have Luis right, okay,
mhm.
theoretically,
Right. Do you have
I
them as
think
a decider or
I
as
have him
a
as a
doer?
decider. I
Okay.
have him as a decider with masculine FI at the top. And I have seen FE is like the huge void that he's leaving. Like he's just
Right.
like,
And you said most of his family is FE, right?
yeah. And so that's why for the longest time I thought he had demon FE, but then it kept not making sense, because I'm like, you should have FE in your stat. You should at least be aware of what the hell it is.
Yeah.
But more and more
He's
it
just
became
got
clear,
masculine FI.
it's just masculine FI. He has no idea about the FE. Like it's
Yeah.
gone in a different universe.
Yeah.
And so that's where I feel like, at least if he was TE, I feel like he could kind of like FE himself. FE and TE, I don't think they're that far apart, really. It's just how do you interact with the tribe? Yeah.
I mean, maybe, yeah. I think because you do have FI second, but you are savior tribe, it's probably easier for you to open up that FI into FE. But I think that I would still challenge that though, because I think a big part of FE. So like we typed second chance last time, although I think second chance might land after this episode lands. I'd have to check our
Yeah, I
log.
have to see. Yeah. I could
But
yeah.
so like he was really really great about sharing his emotions, right? But
Yeah.
we have FI, and like I think I FE fairly well considering I don't have it in my stack. But at the end of the day, when I am feeling an emotion, like in when I'm really in it, sharing that with someone is a very personal thing, and it is still a huge challenge, and I have to push through that, and it takes like tremendous amount of like even when it comes to like people
Mhm.
I'm close with and people
Mhm.
who I trust, it's still really like I cry all the fucking time.
Yeah.
But letting somebody see me cry is a whole nother matter entirely.
See, I don't have
Whereas
okay.
for FE,
Yeah.
I feel like
I think it depends on if it's masculine or feminine though, because I don't think masculine FE will necessarily cry in front of people either.
that's a good point.
They don't.
Well, I mean, does
Because
masculine FE cry?
yeah, it's weird anyway. But
Well, yeah,
the thing about FE, and so I guess like that's the other aspect we should probably talk about FE in general is, there's like the feelings aspect, there's like the extrovert feeling, but there's also
right,
the values of the tribe. And where
right.
I feel often drained, if you will, is this is what happens to me. I love this example. And so I'm just going to throw it out there and you can let me know if you're like, no, it's bullshit. So it's like, so I one of my weird things is I really don't like to have people over at my house. It's like a huge, like, I thought I was an introvert. I thought I was an introvert because people drain me. And it took me a long time to figure out why people drain me. And the reason they do is because I'm manufacturing FE constantly when I'm around people because I'm obligated to the tribe and I'm aware of the sort of social value spectrum. I know it's a thing, but it's not natural to me. So I'm constantly, so like I had friends over, this is like now a year ago, like it's been a while, but like
But
I
it was so traumatizing. You're still
well,
thinking
it's
about it.
just
It's
like, I just can't
probably
believe it. I
traumatizing.
think that's the last time I had people over. That's what I was thinking. I was like, that's the
Oh,
last time I
wow.
had a
Okay.
group of friends over at this location. Um, and we're doing board games and stuff, and I'm an NT, like puzzling, figuring stuff out is what I do all the time. But I'm like, my board game performance goes down when I've got people like at my house because in my mind I'm playing the like, oh, do they value this game? Is my house clean enough game? Are they happy? Are they? Because I'm trying to FE a little bit
You're
there.
trying to take care of the tribe.
I'm trying to do that. Yeah, I'm
Right.
trying to do what like an ESFJ does naturally, right?
Right.
Like I'm trying to, but it's like in this weird like, you know,
Yeah.
mechanical
Yeah.
fashion. Because I'm like, humans like this. Do humans want to eat? What do humans eat? Oh no, oh no. It's like that is happening in my brain, and it uses a chunk of my computing power. And I've noticed that like I suck at games when I've got just folks over. Like all of a sudden, like they were making fun of me, like we were joking and stuff because they're like, "Isn't this your game?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's my game." My brain like can't do both. It has trouble.
That's interesting. That's
Yeah.
fascinating. I'm the opposite of that in terms of like I love hosting people. I like yeah, that's my jam. I enjoy I hate the obligation to FE, but it's like a hobby. Like it's of all of my shadow functions, SI and FE are probably my hobby
Yeah.
functions, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
I enjoy doing them. I like doing them. I like taking care of people. Like when it was Passover just the other day, I had a big Seder. I loved preparing for it. I loved organizing for it. I loved creating that space, that FE space, and bringing in that value and like traditions. I feel like is a very FE concept, which by and large, like don't push your traditions on me.
Right.
But if I get to choose, like, I want to stay in the positive realm of FE, I can't deal with the negativity of it.
Yeah.
Or like when my FE and my FI clash, like I resent FE a lot.
Well, and
Um,
that's what I was wondering, like if because there is that potential for that clash. But I also wonder, as you were talking, sorry, I kind of interrupted
yeah,
because
yeah,
like that like keyed off my brain. I wonder if we're getting into some of the letters differences too, because we have talked about SF as like culture and
yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
And me, that is my demon. Those are my demon
yes,
letters, period. SF.
right.
Like
You'll NT all day long.
I will
Yeah,
NC all day long. And that's the other thing. I'm NT figuring out what the tribe SF wants.
right.
Like I'm not doing it naturally. Yeah. So that's why I was curious on like, because you've got Savior FI, it can run right into FE,
Again, yeah.
you
And
know?
I think that is the realm where it's kind of like, especially, well, I have demon tribe, right? And demon control. So I have a lot of like tribe don't control me
Yeah.
going
Yes.
on, which is why I think I enjoy being the host because then I can
Okay.
FESI, but I do it in
On
my
your
way.
terms.
Yes. So
Okay.
I don't feel controlled.
Yeah.
Whereas if I am in somebody else's space and I am FESIing, well, I'm not SIing, but if I'm FEing in somebody else's space or according to to the FE that is created in that environment, then that is a lot more draining because I feel like, oh, no, this is impinging on my FI. I got to get out.
Whereas oddly, probably because of my obligation to the tribe, I almost would
Yes.
rather do that. Like what drains me is the opposite. Yeah, the hosting people, because it's like, I'm demon self and everything. And so like, yeah, like, so like when I was a kid and my family was very religious and stuff like that, or at least we were church going. I wouldn't say really like super religious, but whatever. Is like, okay, those are the rules. Like you wear a dress, and I prefer that. Just tell me. Like I'll FE, like I'll go with the tribe. Like I'm obligated to do that. Just be clear on the expectations. Don't expect me to figure it out. That's where I lose it. Is I'm like, I can't figure it out. I don't naturally
out the FE.
Yeah.
But if you know what the FE is, then you're like, yeah, try.
Yeah, whatever the culture is, I'll do it.
Curious. If this is because you and I are both double deciders, or if the deciders kind of function a little differently from the observers in terms of like, excuse me, in terms of the obligation for like if our human needs that are associated with the deciders trump the domain.
I think they do.
It seems for us that it kind of does. Yeah. Because I don't know, like I've been thinking about TI, and I think my understanding of TI is still kind of shaky.
Yeah,
and I don't know if I do TI.
Yeah, maybe we should start talking about TI, because that's why I started with those two, because those are definitely our shadow.
Yeah, of course.
Oh man, I had a long, confusing conversation with an FETI user the other day.
Okay.
And what happened was I asked this person for their TI opinion of my type. Like, hey, do you think I'm mistyped, right? And because of their strong FE, this was a FE savior, they were trying to manage my feelings. So they're like, well, what about this? And all of a sudden, like, because I was asking for her TI, she didn't want to give it to me. And instead of just doing it,
PS and EJ, FEEJ.
Yes, FEEJ.
So her TI is at the very bottom.
Is at the very bottom. Exactly. And it was like really frustrating for me to finally tease it out. And then once I teased it out, it was like very much of like, this is the truth. Like she was just like, nope, this is what I think you are. And there was like no idea that like it could be anything different, because it's like, that's her truth, And that's what I've seen with the TIs. It's just like, this is what I think. And yeah.
I think I have a very hard time teasing out what is TI and what is NI, because I have NI truths, right?
Yeah.
Does that mean that my NI truths are like my version of TI? Like
I could be.
I have a hard time teasing those apart.
I think
just understanding what TI looks like.
I think it could be. I think they're close. Like I think they can, because T and N are close. T and N are very, very close.
Well, I mean, they're the puzzling functions, right? Yeah.
I think what it comes down to is like what I've seen, or like the best way I can describe it is it's like the burden of proof for the TI user is their self. Like they are like, I will decide if it's true or not, as opposed to sort of looking, because it sounds like you take in the sensory and you're looking for like the pattern that sort of makes sense in a more TE fashion, if you will.
Yeah.
Whereas like they are the ultimate arbiter. So whether or not the pattern holds across a larger scope doesn't even matter. Like they're just like, this is what I think. And you're going to have to like overcome their burden of proof to what they think. Yeah. They're a tricky bunch, those TI users.
Yeah, I have. So how is your shadow TI? Like, do you have access to it in the same way that you have access to FE, or do you think you have access to FE more easily than access to TI?
I kind of feel like I have access to TI more easily.
More easily than FE.
I think I do, but I think I bootstrap it back to your point about S or NI. I kind of bootstrap it with my SI also. Like if I can put my SI and my FI together, that becomes a TI sort of thing for me. Like I can write down like, these are my personal truths. Like that question that they always bring up in the class where, who is it? Tom Bilyeu or something. He asks.
No, it's
I thought it was Tommy Tom
School
Tom.
of Greatness. No,
that's not Tom Bilyeu.
It's not Tom Tom, is it?
I thought Tom Tom was the School of Greatness.
No,
Anyway.
School of Greatness is. Oh, I forgot his name. I was just watching him interview someone for the class, because I know that Dave and Shannon are going to use his interview.
Oh, you know that.
Lewis Howes.
Sorry.
House. He's the one with the truths.
Yeah, the 3 through. I feel like I might slow down, but I wouldn't be completely stuck by that question, because I have written down, I have taken the time to like understand like what are my personal, I call them my personal coon. They're like There's Dojo Kun in martial arts. And so like I made like a set and there, so it's my FI, it's really my FI, but I can like give you like, and I think because I'm TE savior, my FI, I can pretty much give you a reason underneath it and make it TI. But I think Dave has mentioned this before too, that they're not, I'm not going to die on that hill though. Like they're not super.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's the interesting thing, like the difference between TIFI and I don't know. I'm still like each time I try to puzzle out the TI, I get a little bit closer, but it doesn't feel. I don't, of all 8 functions, it's the one I think I understand the least, which makes sense because my TE is single activated. So I think getting TI and NE, well, yeah, TI and E, but especially that TI, I think is probably a big challenge in my life.
Yeah. I'll say
Although I also have my truths.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what you don't get is the way that they are so, they being the TI users are so sort of like, you know, it's personal to them. I think that's where
Yes.
us with the TE, we're like,
Yeah,
just
our
pick another reason.
crowdsourced.
Like,
It's like, oh,
who
wait,
cares?
so that reason doesn't work? Okay, let's go gather some more.
Yeah. Well, and
Let's
that's
go
what I
get
told
them.
this person. I was like, I don't care what type you think I am. Like that does not affect my FI. Like, go ahead. You know, I mean, you could tell me I'm a ESFP, what, you know, tell me whatever you think I am. That's why I asked you. I am posing a question to the tribe to get the tribe's reasons and stuff. You don't have to worry about my FI. My FI is like completely separate from all of this opinion, right? But like they don't get that because they think like if I narrow down a truth, it's like a big deal, you know? It's like, oh no, I told you a reason, and it's personal all of a sudden. Whereas I'm
Yeah.
like, I'll just throw them, especially me with Savior TE. Good Lord, like I'm just, and any, I'm just like, psh, 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 like I don't.
Yeah. Whereas we experience that on the other side, right? With the FE, where for an FE user, it's like throwing out all of these values, and where our values are so like, whoa,
Yes.
whoa, whoa.
Yeah. I had said
Yeah,
personal.
user feels that. Yeah.
Yeah, I had said personal values to this person, then they literally laughed. They were like, "What's personal values?" I'm like, "What do you mean, what's personal values? Values are personal." Like, to me, FE is like, here's the potpourri of values that you could choose from, and then I pick the one that like value matters to me. And they don't
Yes.
do that.
Yes, and that's kind
Blows
of I
my
think
head.
maybe where the TE versus TI comes in is like we have access to that TE. Like here's all the reasons to choose from. We just don't choose. We don't
Yeah,
narrow it down,
yeah,
and that's where I think. Well, you probably have more access to that than I do because it's my demon and your
yeah,
savior.
yeah.
Where
Double
like
activated. Yeah,
accessing that, yeah, accessing that in terms of like, okay, so here are all of the I still don't like truths and principles. I feel
I
like both
know,
of
but
those
that's what they say.
they call them
They're
truths and
those words.
principles. And like
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. We need to
I think
bring
it's
one on
so
here.
easy to like for example, one of my core values is like understanding, right? Like how, in terms of regular day-to-day use and the words that we use, like how is that not a principle? Like the principle is that we should all act from a place of understanding, right? Why can't you use the word principle to describe that as well as values? I have in the past.
Yeah. Well,
I might be getting into semantics, but
well, a little, I mean, I don't know because what I think, like I said, we're well outside of our experience. This is definitely our shadow is like, I think that for them, it's like, there's a reason behind that. That's like a very personal reason. So like, yeah, you say, I value understanding. And they're going to think, you know, so that, uh, two people can work together and working together is a good thing because we can get more done, blah, 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 something like that. Right. I mean, they
right, but
think they
even
go
in what
further.
you just described, it was
I
it was a
know.
great example going back and forth between reasons and
Oh
values.
yeah, absolutely. But I think their root is like deeper, if you will. Like for us, it's like those reasons are all great to back up my value, but at the end of the day, you value that thing, right? Like you don't need
Right.
these reasons. You value it. Whereas like they need that reason.
So there, yeah, and the reasons are so personal, and the
Yeah.
values kind of back up those reasons.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like, oh man,
Fascinating.
actually Personality Hacker recently did a podcast about TI, where they talked about the other thing is TI can give space for troublesome thoughts too, like, or not troublesome thoughts, but like people's individual thinking. So if you think something that isn't popular or unpopular opinion or whatever, the TI users will, like, again, die on that hill of an unpopular thought. It's not necessarily a value. They think this thing. And if the tribe doesn't value that, they're kind of outside of what the tribe values. Yeah.
Okay.
Whereas like we FE users or FI users, we are more willing to let everybody have your own personal um,
Values.
values and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It is very close. I mean, it's a fine line. I think it's more like how you experience it, whether it's a logicked out
I
thing or
mean,
not.
like, I can spot TI mostly because the person is speaking such a foreign language.
Yeah.
Like I can understand FE, I can speak FE, but when like especially masculine TI,
Oh,
I get
absolutely.
very like, what?
Well,
Like
it's
it's
similar
very foreign
to
language.
me. It's kind of similar to SI as like an expensive function or whatever, because I think that there's a lot that's built on a TI. Like they have to go, I think it's similar to how I was saying, like I have to kind of SE in order to SI. They have to have the reasons and then narrow down to like this one is the one that's like a core, principle or truth
Mhm.
for me. And that's why they get real stubborn on it, and we don't quite get that with our TEs. We're like, why are you so, it does feel semantic. It feels like you're a lot of times parsing words and really
Yeah.
getting, and we're just like, I don't get that. But that's how they, yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's the other
Anyway.
thing of TI is that it is very personal, and so it's like
Yes.
in the same way that I don't want to share my FI, right? That it is hard and challenging to share my FI, especially when I'm like in it. If
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yes.
Asking someone who's a TI user to share their TI it's a very personal thing,
Hmm.
which again is like mind-boggling to me because to me reasons are very
Yeah,
shared.
it's really funny. Like my best friend is probably lead FESE is what I'm thinking. And like it's so funny when she goes to say her TI, like it's like all of a sudden she's like, okay, hold on, guys. I have a reason. And I'm just like, it's okay. Just say
Yeah.
it. Like, it's like this whole energy shift. It's so funny to watch. Like, and same with that person I was talking to. Like, it took her forever to just just
Get at the TI.
tell me
It
it.
reminds me of the Chris Angel class
Yeah.
where
Oh
for
yeah.
people who
That
might
was
not have
funny.
seen it, there was a in the Chris Angel class who he is FENI, double
Yeah.
masculine FENI.
Yeah.
There is this like one interview where he's like, okay, I'll tell you this because you and I are longtime friends. He's telling the interviewer. And then he gives him this like TI truth,
Yeah.
which to him was like, whoa,
Whoa.
whoa, whoa. Like it
Oh
was a
man.
big deal to share that. Yeah.
Huge. Yeah.
Which,
Yeah.
well, okay, so we've been talking about all
I
these
know
different
we
between TI and
yeah.
TE, but
Yeah, I
like,
was gonna
so
say
how
we
do we
haven't
get
really
at?
talked about TE and FI either
Oh yeah, as shadow
as
functions.
shadows. Yeah.
That's true. But
Yeah.
before we move, so how do you simulate TI aside from just like do we narrow it down our TE? Is that
I
the
think
main thing?
that's what it is. Yeah. And
Yeah.
then we link it to an FI. That's what I think it is. Like we have
Okay.
an FI value and we can come up with the reasons behind it. And maybe one of those is really, in alignment with our
Yeah.
FI value. And so like if you say, I value honesty, I can give you a reason, but at the end
Yeah.
of the day, it's because I value honesty. I
Right.
just do.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think is curious to ask about the deciders is um, which modality do you see affecting it? So,
Yeah.
like when you simulate FE, is your FE masculine or feminine? Because I actually, for myself, when I do simulate FE, it's feminine. That's when I'm feminine with the tribe.
Mm-hmm.
Because the rest of the time, I'm like, at the tribe with the TE
Because your
reason
feeling
is
is,
feminine.
yeah, I wonder if it's our savior because I feel like, well, no, I'm definitely not masculine FE. I'm definitely not. If I'm doing FE, it probably is more feminine.
More feminine, yeah.
Yeah.
And when
Yeah.
you're doing TI, is it more masculine?
Yeah. 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 I think it probably
Actually,
is.
yeah, me too. The few like
Yeah.
truths, principles that I have in mind that are like not values, they are
They're,
they're like
yeah,
very like in a sensorily
solid.
kind of way, very like
Solid.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know if we will have time to talk TE and FI. I may actually run out of time, but we could try.
Okay.
I don't know that
Um,
we have much to say there because it's not ours. I mean, we could speculate on it.
well, I mean, yes, let's speculate, I guess. So then if you are a TIFE user and you're trying to get at FITE, then well, I guess it would be doing the opposite. So
Yeah.
you're trying to open up your TI to simulate TE, right? So the
Yeah.
natural inclination is to automatically narrow it down and for it to be personal, but instead having that like um that the reasons are communal and that they could be crowdsourced and that they don't have to be quite so personal.
Yeah. I think that that's where, at least I've seen TI users run into trouble or whatever. That's where they get defensive, is they don't want to, they really resist doing that. It feels like TI is very defensive of its TI, its subjective experience. And when you try to come in, like some of the criticism that used to go on in the group, I don't know if it still does, was this idea that like, the Dave and Shannon method is not the be all end all, that there has to be a space for subjectivity. It can't just be objective personality.
Oh my
We
God,
got
that's
to
such a
have
good
some
point, and that's
subject.
very often coming from TIs.
Yes. Yes. That's the TIs saying that my subjective opinion should matter. What I think about what I am should matter from a reason standpoint. And I've seen them punch on that. And maybe they're masculine TI. I don't know, but that's where I see them.
That's a really good point.
They
Yeah.
resist this idea, the very idea that opening up to objectivity is a good thing, which is so counterintuitive to me. I'm like, oh,
Well, yeah, because our reason machine is trying to be as
yeah,
objective as possible.
yeah. But it's funny because I mean, I'm extroverted intuition, and yet I can see. I mean, I did ask. I was somewhat kidding a little bit about why would I gather the sensory, right? But I can understand.
Simulate the reasons. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I can see the value of gathering the sensory, but the idea that like objectivity is just not good and we should just rely on our subjective experience, it just seems really odd to me, you know?
At the same time, like I agree with you.
Yeah.
At the same time, I think the other thing that is really fascinating to look at, and Dave and Shannon had a Q&A about this, so it's not like a set in stone pattern or anything like that. But when they looked at, I think they were looking through like people with the highest IQs or Nobel Prize winners or something like that, a lot of TI users.
TI. Well,
Definitely
because
Savior T and
yes.
a lot of Savior Sensory, but a lot of TI.
Yeah, and I think it's like I said, I mean, it's kind of an expensive function. Like they need to do a lot of research and a lot of understanding in order to pick the thing that really matters, to
To
them.
them, what
Yeah.
is true to
It
them.
takes a lot
Yes.
of work. And that's what I've heard from like, if you believe Antonia Dodge from Personality Hacker, like she says that she's an ENTP, so she's NETI. And so when she talks about her TI, like changing it is like a whole
She's
project
not an
they have to
ENTP.
like, well,
Sorry, she has FE coming out of her ass, and that's just from
well,
one or two podcast episodes.
she at least has TI in her stack then.
Yes, yes,
Right?
yes.
But she says to change the TI, she has to like dig it. It's like it sounds like digging out a tree. That's what it sounds like to me. Like it's like I gotta dig down under these reasons and take them all out, and then go get some more,
Yeah,
like put them back.
which
It's
totally
like
makes sense if she's an
if it's a demon.
FEEJ. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um.
I'm thinking
But
I'm running
anyway,
out of time.
okay,
So
cool.
FI, we could either give it short shrift or
Well, I mean, it's the opposite of what we were talking about.
yeah,
So if you're
absolutely.
trying to simulate your FI, is that there are all of these values and they are crowdsourced and they are communal, and you have to bring up your TI to somehow triangulate with that
Yeah.
FE to figure out, well, what is valuable to you? Where do your values lie?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we actually kind of talked about both of these in our long
Yeah.
discussion on FE and TI, right? We kind of
Yeah,
talk about the opposite.
both of them. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I don't know. But I would think that for what I have experienced, maybe I'll put it this way. What I've seen with people who are Savior FE is they are aware of their FI though. Like their FI seems to be like one of the many FEs. They
Yeah,
they
it's
put a
part.
value, a higher value on their sort of
Kind of
tribe
like
value.
our TI exists within our
Yeah,
TE, right?
exactly. Exactly.
But we don't narrow it down to TI. So
Yes.
FEs also, they have their own values
Yes.
among all the others. It's just that the
Yeah.
tribe's values trump
Trump
whatever
theirs.
personal values.
They
So
have.
personal values are not even like
Yeah.
noticed.
Yep. Yep.
They're not
Yeah.
narrowed down in that way.
I remember Mike Silverstein. I always want to say something else. It's like Sburzma. I think because I worked with a guy. Anyway, but Mike has mentioned that he, he thought he was NEFI. Now, part of it is he wasn't aware of the jumpers, so a lot of us that are
Yeah.
jumpers, you didn't even think about it
That's
because he was like, yeah, I'm really well aware of my FI, but he agreed that, yeah, I'm totally tribe above self. Like FE made total sense once he understood the jumpers. And so I always think of him when I think of like FI as a shadow function that, especially for FE saviors, it's probably easier,
more accessible.
more
And a
accessible.
double decider like Mike, yeah.
Yeah, him being a double decider, everything. So, okay. Well,
So
cool.
before we sign off,
Yep.
to dear listeners, I would love to hear from you guys. There's
Yes.
two things that came up in particular. One of them is like, do you see your access to your decider shadow functions different from your access to your decider observer functions?
Yeah.
Like how do those differ? Because you and I are both double deciders, so I'm wondering if that's coming
Helping
from our
us.
double decider thing,
Yeah.
or is there a difference in how those are accessible?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And then I think accessing NE.
Yeah. Accessing any.
Yeah,
Yep.
let's wind
Okay.
down.
Yep. Let me wind down. Where is it? Where's the ending?
It's in the notes.
Oh, there it is. Want to share your thoughts and cut. Want to share your thoughts? What do you think about the shadow functions? You can do so on the Objectively Typed subreddit. There will be a link in the show notes. We'll also post our upcoming episode topic if you like typing along with us. So thanks for listening to Objectively Typed with Evelyn.
And Virsaviya.
And until next time, bye.
Bye, guys.
And
See.